Welcome to Conscious I, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world, featuring Ravi and Savitri. Good morning, Ravi.
And good morning, Savitri.
We have another individual with us today that I'm so excited and honored to have join us in our dialogue about the dharmic path. So I would like to welcome you, Stefen Robinson, to our Conscious Eye podcast this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
hmm So let's just open it up and go wherever you would like to go because we have we have been talking a lot about Dharma and the Dharmic path and creativity and our current environment in our socio-political world. So we have a mixed bag of things that happen in the way that we live our lives. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where we are, like this moment in time this morning?
Yeah. Um, I guess I'm originally from Kankakee, Illinois, but I've lived in Bloomington now for Bloomington, Illinois. I don't know how far your listeners go, so if they're not familiar. Not, yeah,
They
so I'm
go. We have
quite
some.
far.
Not Bloomington, Indiana. We may have some folks in Indiana. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to get them confused.
exactly. Yeah, I ended up here a while back. I'm a musician and a teacher and a Zen Buddhist in the Soto tradition, which is relevant to the discussion here, I suppose.
Yes, yes.
Um,
hmm
my primary Zen teacher was Zuiko Redding. She passed away a couple of years ago. Um, and she is who I took vows with back in 2016, I think, maybe
Okay, we're
2016.
going to be dated here in a minute if we go back any farther than that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, my I teach sociology and history at a local high school. And I have a partner and we have a son who is 12. We have two dogs. I grow my own and maintain my own bonsai trees.
Yes, I've seen those posted.
Oh,
That's an
thank
amazing thing. We may need to get behind the scenes on some dialogue around that too, because
yeah.
I've dabbled and failed. So,
We'll have to share some of those on our, we'll have to share some of those on our socials.
Yeah, that'd
yeah,
be
I'd love
fun.
to see them.
I
yeah.
love it. Yeah. And I guess you could say politically, which is I guess relevant to my music and my work.
Yes. Okay.
I am sort of religiously pacifist. So that's a little bit of my background, I guess.
Yeah.
I helped run a couple of record labels. I put out a lot of music.
hmm
Um, nothing too fancy.
You have a group that shows up too, right? That you've been working with musically, that has live performances, and on occasion I see those posted.
Yeah, I perform. Well, it depends. It goes up and down, but I've been performing quite a bit. I have a bunch of shows coming up end of April, beginning of May. I'm doing a little 4 day, like part of a tour with an artist who has been on tour for a couple of months. We're doing 4 shows together end of this month, beginning of May. And that'll be fun. That's with a trio. I'll be playing mostly bass clarinet in that trio. The drummer is Tatsuya Nakatani, and then John Byler Dan, who's another local cat. He's playing double bass. Um,
Nice. Yeah. Will
yeah,
that
and
be
I've been
local?
Can folks, where
Mhm.
what?
can folks find your music who aren't local? Where can they find your stuff to
Yeah,
listen to on the
probably.
interwebs?
Yeah, the easiest thing is to just look up Yay Big, Yeabig, like the measurement. Um, and space.
Okay.
Yeabig.weebly.com. And then my all of the records are downloadable and listenable from yeabig.bandcamp.com. That's where you can
Oh yeah.
buy the physical media and get high quality downloads. So yeabig.weebly and yeabig.bandcamp. And then I'm on Instagram
Cool.
at just my name, Stefen Robinson.
Very nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because
Bandcamp is a nice resource for musicians at, my level,
Hmm.
where we
Hmm.
can very easily share things online, and they have a very easy system to do sales with for physical media. It and they take a cut, but it's like you don't have to pay anything up front, and it's pretty convenient.
Savitri and I have talked about how we've been so inundated with technology in this age that we're really circling back to grassroots efforts and how we connect and how we communicate our needs in our, society. And I feel like that's an example of people coming together, like sharing their talent. There's so much talent out there. And it's not just up to the mega media to, put that out or put in our ears and out on the waves what we listen to. And I love that that gives a platform for folks who are creating music like you, like Lindsay, like others, to get that out there and for people to really have access to. So that's cool to hear that it's user friendly too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I wanted, yeah, I hope to hear more about your musical style because I haven't heard a lot of it, just
yeah.
snippets.
Hmm.
It's hard to explain. When the Yay Big project started, I was actually producing kind of, I guess you could call it like experimental hip hop,
Hmm.
and and then I linked up with a vocalist, a rapper, when we were living in Chicago, me and my partner, and so then there was this duo project, Yay Big and Kid Static. Kid Static is the vocalist. We toured together for a few years and put out a couple of albums. Um, we're still very close, although we don't live in the same state anymore. We're actually working on a new record, but
Oh.
it's going kind of slow. My son calls him Uncle Moses. He's like my brother.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so Yay Big, when I first started to get some press and was touring, and some people were starting to know our music, it was all this sort of off the beaten path hip hop stuff, and when I went back to get my teaching degree, that was kind of prompted by my, I guess I should say, uh, dissatisfaction with the idea that I was going to have to live on the road, if I was going to make a
Right.
living in music.
Hmm.
And so I thought I needed to do something so I could have a stable income and do meaningful work so that I could not worry about money with my art. So I went back to get my teaching degree. And around that time, Moses ended up moving away to New York and California and back and forth. And then he ended up right outside of Austin. And then the Yay Big project kind of evolved. I did a couple of solo records, and then I started doing these other collaborations. I started doing a lot of free improvisation, and less working with vocals. So
Hmm.
sometimes people hear Yay Big and they hear like some free improvised bass clarinet and they think that's what it is. But people from like 2007 know it as the weird hip hop project.
Hmm.
uh, so it's like it's it depends on what month you catch me, what it sounds like.
I love the clarinet era, so I'll have to go back a little further.
Yeah. That's an evolutionary process that you just described that also happens in people's spiritual development. So,
Oh yeah.
can you speak a little bit to your Buddhist journey and how that evolved, where it began, and where you are now with it as well?
Yeah.
I think the music and the Buddhist um, philosophies and way of life are so integrated in what I've heard from your music, either of your two ways of being.
Yeah. 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 They're very yeah, they inform each other deeply.
Hmm.
I I grew up atheist, and not just atheist, I guess. When I was, a teen, Midwestern, straight cis white boy. I was very like anti-theism. I wasn't just atheist. I thought you know, I thought religions were the primary force causing violence on the planet. I was always pacifist. I didn't know the word when I was a kid, but I was raised pacifist. My mom didn't ever use the word, but we were raised to speak out against injustice and stand up against unjust authority, but never to inflict harm on people.
Right.
That was the message from my mom, unspoken. Her example is what taught me, and I learned the word pacifism when I was in my late teens or whatever, and I was like, oh, this is what I am. But I was super anti-religion and didn't want to have anything to do with it, uh, and was always plagued by anxiety and panic attacks as a young person. Um, and I sort of around the same time in my early 20s, I guess you could say, learned and started studying economics. I learned a lot about capitalism and you talked about evolution. My beliefs about religion began to be more informed by um, economics. And I think that the economic system in which we live is, creates the culture and it creates the religions and all of these things. And so I started to see that, oh, it's not religion necessarily that is producing all of this violence. This has more to do with the economics underneath it all. And I don't think it's just one thing or the other, but anyway, I started to slowly get over my knee-jerk, angst toward religion. I started to get over that when I was actually around the same time I was touring with Kid Static, because I was struggling with panic attacks on the road. And when I was at home, off the road in Chicago, I was at a dog park and I met this guy. His name was John Feller. I don't know what happened to him. We have not kept in touch, but he was a Buddhist fellow. We both had boxer dogs.
Yeah, that'll bring you together. Common
Yeah.
dogs.
Yeah. And we were at this dog park and we were talking. He was also a musician. He was a violin teacher. And he basically, we were talking about the life of a musician or whatever. And I was telling him I was struggling with anxiety and panic attacks before concerts and stuff. And he asked me if I ever meditated. And I said, I tried it. It didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And he said, in typical Buddhist fashion, he said, well, you could always try again. And he invited me to his temple. He practiced at a Shambhala center in the north side of
Hmm.
Chicago.
Hmm.
Um, and he gave me a book by uh what's his name? He was Pema Chodron's teacher. It was called The Sacred Path of the Warrior, I think. Um,
Yes, it's on my shelf as well. Hmm.
yeah. So I read that and I was on the road reading this and I was getting up every day and meditating. I had been to the temple a few times. I told him like I'm not interested in Buddhism. I just am interested in trying to lessen my anxiety and get rid of these panic attacks. And I didn't want to take any drugs for it or anything. Um, Not that I'm opposed to people taking medication if it helps them. I'm just saying, for me, I didn't want to do that.
Right.
Addiction runs in my family, and I don't drink, not, uh, so I was getting up early on the road every day and meditating and reading this book, and it started to have noticeable effects on me, and I was really sort of like taken by this book. And then I found out this guy Chogyam Trungpa was like a really complicated and in my mind kind of seemed terrible. It's like he's like sleeping around with his students and he's
He
not
had a
alcoholic.
lifestyle. Yes, he did. Hmm.
Yeah, and then I kind of was just like that just like reconfirmed my teenage angst. I was like, they're all a bunch of hypocrites. So I turned my back on it again. I kept practicing meditation, but I was like, I don't have anything to do with any of these religious people. Because they're all hypocrites. That's what I was thinking. I don't think that now, but
Hmm.
but I kept practicing meditation, and then over numerous years, there was noticeable differences happening eh,
Yes.
to me, and I got to a point where I just couldn't deny it anymore. I studied Buddhism more and more. I was like, there's something to this. And I met some Zen people, and that seemed suited. I was like, oh, this makes sense to me. The way that they think about this and go about the practice, the shikantaza, the zazen, all of that resonated with me. The simplicity of it. And then I met Zuiko and and I talked to her. I had some, private conversations with her. And like one of them was, I remember meeting with her at a coffee shop in Normal and asking her, can I be, involved in anarchist community organizing and be a Buddhist? And her response to me was, well, if you're not doing that, what's the point of this? She was very like affirming. She's like, you have to do good community. Like that's the whole point. The point is not to sit on the cushion. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that was very validating. I went to a Vipassana retreat well, a couple years before that, actually, a few years before that, and that was pretty profound. I ended up leaving early because I had some very profound moments. I was like, I need to leave. Um, uh, and yeah, so it happened over the course of many years. I
Mm-hmm.
finally accepted. It wasn't like I like became Buddhist or like converted to Buddhism. It was that I eventually realized I had always been, and I just sort of started to understand or learn the language to speak about it in a way that I hadn't before, and met people who exposed me to practices that allowed me to be more intentional about it and to dive a little deeper into it. And then the panic attack stopped. I haven't had one in since like 2012.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, I think, Savitri and I, how I've called, Kundalini yoga a technology because it works. So your belief system, can be an amplifier for the practice, but the technology just works, as the meditation worked for anxiety attacks. And you said something, if I could ask you to circle back to that, coming from the practice of Kundalini yoga, we also had to go through a reckoning with our teacher, being, the accusations of sexual offenses, sexual assault. Um, and I had my own, I had to deal with that through my practice and my relationship with it. And so I'm curious, how did you come back to, because you mentioned, yeah, that doesn't, matter anymore. Like, how did you come to the point where you could still stay connected to that practice personally, and its benefits and, ameliorate that
Yeah.
past?
I remember talking to Zuiko about Chogyam Trungpa specifically and how he was like an obstacle. He was both a like door for me and an obstacle, preventing me from crossing through the door.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, a lot of very flawed people have been very good teachers. And I was just, I don't, I just, it like, it took me a while to just accept that, yeah, I don't need to think that the guy was a great human being to admit that his teachings helped me along the path.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I don't have much respect for the guy.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Historically, you're probably in the majority on that. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um, But I have to admit, his writings were one of the first doors for me to cross through.
Yeah.
Um, so
I like that analogy or, with metaphor, whichever it
yeah,
is. Because I think it's important for people to know, because I think that comes up in almost any vein, any, path that you may follow. If there's a teacher, they're fallible.
yeah,
And it's how do you um continue on in the faith or the path or the practice and let go, or of that aspect of it. I think that comes up in many paths, if not every path. You're going to come across that, and I think that, I mean, well, that is part of our spiritual path as well. As um, we can you can have those periods of being really caught up in the newness of this spiritual awakening. And then when the reality is set back in, you kind of fall off the cliff. How do you climb that back up that hill
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stay on the path?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That made me think that makes me think about Marx, I'm not some like hardcore Marxist, although, I also think he's like one of the most brilliant thinkers I've ever read, So I kind of have to like reconcile those things. It's like you can, he seems like he was a jerk, but his
Mhm.
dissection of capitalism hasn't been topped, I think it's like people have only added to what he brought to us. They haven't like surpassed his critique.
Yeah, you went through this pathway of religion and your perspective around that when you were younger to economics, and that same perspective then was overlaid, and then we find that those two things right now are very intricately integrated in the environment that we're living in, where religion and economics are a big part of the big message that is out there for at least the United States, and where we're headed. So uh, I find that really interesting how you brought that together. And I made a note and I thought, yeah, they really are pulled together in a way. And now overtly, we are looking in that mirror and seeing it happening. Um, Another thing that you said that I thought was real interesting is how you went through a series of open doors and then closed doors, open doors and closed doors. And at the same time, there was one consistent thing along the way, and that was the Buddhist philosophy. Um, I know there are different lineages. I'm not familiar with all of them. Did you find that making that shift that you said to come to um, the lineage that finally was the one that opened like the lotus blossom for you, and where you are now, were the nuances just that unique, or was there a really big difference in what you'd been exposed to before?
Hmm. This is a great question. Okay, let me go. Let's talk about. Let me mention the economic thing real quick.
Oh, good. Okay.
Let me just say, first of all, I don't understand how anybody could actually believe and practice any of the dharmic traditions and not be anti-capitalist. And I also don't understand how anybody could actually take seriously the supposed teachings of Jesus and not be anti-capitalist. I just don't understand it. It's like it's clear as day to me. And I really appreciated once I read that the Dalai Lama, well, there's this great book about the Dalai Lama very famously said he was a socialist, years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he also said at one point, and I'm not in that lineage, which we'll get to in a second, but I really, have fondness for some of the things the Dalai Lama has said publicly. I don't know a whole lot about his private life or anything, but he said once, if science proves Buddhism wrong, Buddhism has to change, which I also really appreciated,
Mm-hmm.
because I came up, very, like I said, very atheist, anti-theist, and very science guy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, the whole economic thing just makes sense to me. It's like, I realized I was pacifist and anti-capitalist before I realized I was Buddhist, and it just made sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, these things go together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the lineage thing is interesting, yeah, because I didn't first get exposed to the Zen stuff. My first exposure was really to the Shambhala, and that I guess you could say is in the Vajrayana tradition, 'cause-
Right, because he really helped begin that Shambhala
yeah.
thread that went worldwide.
And he
Yes.
comes out of that Tibetan tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied the Theravada, some of the Theravada stuff. One of the early books I really, really found super illuminating is called I think it's called What the Buddha Taught. It's by Walpola Rahula.
It's on
And
my shelf too.
yeah, yeah, that book's great. It's super clinical. It's very like
Yeah, I love that. It puts that intellect right in line. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm okay with
And
that.
and he's a Theravada dude, and I was like, oh, this is like this type of describing it made sense to me because it's not flowery. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like Thich Nhat Hanh, I think he's also been very illuminating for me, but his stuff is so flowery. Sometimes I just like don't want that. It's like you don't have to like butter it up all the time. But his writing is beautiful. It's undeniably beautiful, and he's changed innumerable lives, you know. Uh so the Zens, I don't know. Like I came to the Zen stuff first as many, quote unquote Western Buddhists do through uh Shin Suzuki, his book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind.
Uh-huh.
Shunryo Suzuki. Um and Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was just so like simple. It was like, I don't know, like the Zen stuff is just it kind of like cuts away any of the extraneous, superfluous, you know, unnecessary flowery stuff and just cuts to the chase. It's like um it just made sense to me. And then when I met Zuiko, she just confirmed it. I was like, oh, this woman is like a real hero. And she's super brilliant and super sharp. She was also in her, past life before she became a Zen priest, she was a sociologist. And I taught sociology and we really resonated over that. I remember being at the Cedar Rapids Zen Center up in Iowa where she was based out of and for a meditation retreat, and I was making coffee, and I pulled the beans out of her cabinet, and they were from a socialist collective. There was like a big red star on the coffee bean bag, and I was like, Zuiko, do you know what this is from? And she was like, why do you think I bought it? And I was like, so I don't know. It just kind of was very serendipitous or happenstance or luck or coincidence. I don't know what it is that brought me specifically to the Zen stuff, but it just made sense to me. The Vajrayana stuff is very culturally contingent upon
Yes.
Tibetan history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't come out of that culture or that history, and so a lot of the whole like all of the bodhisattvas and deities and the different realms and stuff, that stuff doesn't make sense to me. I see all of that as metaphor, which maybe many Vajrayana people also do, but
Mm-hmm.
I think some people also see those things literally, which I just don't. I don't even care if the Buddha ever actually lived. It's irrelevant to me. For me, it's all about the teachings and the practices. My views on uh so-called reincarnation, karma, they're all very like rooted in actual like physics and
Sure.
you
Yes.
know
Yes.
and the Zen stuff
Substantial.
is just so like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's just we are empty of inherent self-nature. Everything is impermanent and interdependent. Just sit, observe the mind, try to live in the moment. What's the reality of this moment? That's it. That
Because
that's
we're
how
on
I
to the next moment. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's the simplest and the hardest thing to do
Mm-hmm.
because you
Yeah.
have to always do it. And we talk about that a lot here too, is it's that practice. It's the doing it consistently that has the effect. But it's sitting there and constant, bringing yourself back to this moment, and it's a constant practice. And I love to see how it evolves over, how it's evolved in my life and shaped me. And it's so interesting to hear how it's evolved in your life and shaped you, and it's your path. And
Yeah.
um, I was something also that really stood out to me that you mentioned early on is how you're like you always knew you were this, and you just didn't have the words for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's so much of what this life is unlearning. And it is that, like the example of your mother who taught by doing, by being, um, not by telling. That is what we're here to do, is to be that lighthouse, to just be. And when we are doing that in our aligned way with what is authentic with us, it's funny to see how that plays out and unravels into what this or, however you want to put it. But, peel away all the layers of the onion and what do you get? Just a sitting Buddhist, which is just it's just funny to me how life works, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And in the Soto Zen stuff too, at least the way Zuiko taught it to me, and from a lot of the stuff I've read in my own personal practices, I also appreciate how there's this insistence that you don't attain enlightenment. You don't like reach nirvana.
Right.
Those are like states of being that you temporarily reside in when you're fully engaged in the practice. So
Yeah.
like that just makes sense to me. It's like if I'm impermanent and I am interdependent with everything around me and I am empty of inherent self-nature, there can't possibly any quote unquote me to actually achieve anything or to be reincarnated. It doesn't, it's just that when you're enmeshed in the practice fully at this moment, that that is that is it. Um,
The interesting thing about it too, and I say this sometimes in the meditations that I lead, is that if you get to that description that you just gave, which is lovely, and you begin to recognize it, if you point to it with your mind, it's elusive and it dissolves.
yeah.
And so you're no longer being in it, now you're analyzing it. So I love the description that you gave. Those words are lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
No, and it was great to hear. It's again, such a great example of someone's journey into, again, how it evolved for you. And that's what we're here to share with those who do listen with us is,
Mhm.
we're all on a different path. And it's interesting how you said, like, even the coffee bag, the things that come into your life and the times that they do, it's our job to just be present enough in that moment to see it for what it is. And or even if we can't put a word to it or a what or a why, it's that little um sparkle nugget, those little glimmers that show us, that feeling that you get when you're like, yeah, this is it. And then,
Yeah.
but if you try to describe it with words, just like, Savitri said in that meditation, if you try to put your mind to it, it goes away. It's like that feeling that, I'm here doing and being that which is my purpose, or just being here in this moment. But then if you try to, it's just, I love those moments. So I appreciate you sharing those. It's those little moments that remind us why we're here and keep us present and keep us on our path, whatever it may be. And I think sometimes we feel lost from that. So it's just a nice reminder that we can come to those moments at any time if we're present in that moment and are aware of what's being, brought into our path, into our center of awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. And those moments are like, they're really, you just have to be open to them. Like you can't chase them. You can't like plan them. And sometimes you have them and like you're saying, you don't understand it when it's happening. Like I
Right.
remember when I was 14, the first time I heard people who know me, they're probably like, oh, he's talking about this again, and they're always talking about. But there's the first time I heard John Coltrane's album, "A Love Supreme."
Mhm.
And that record is one of the first like spiritual experiences I can remember pointing to in my youth, where I had feelings. That record invoked things within me that I had no vocabulary to explain.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
it wasn't until years later I was like, oh. And when I try to explain it to other people, it's very difficult. But
Yeah.
that record has a lot of significance for me as one of the like moments in my life where the path was shown to me, but I did not understand it. I just
Mhm.
had to keep sort of like moving in its direction. And now with my music, I really, Coltrane is a real hero, for me. And
Yeah.
I want to
I
do what
agree.
he tried to
Mhm.
do. He wanted to like bring peace and love to the world through music. That's all he wanted to do. When he like kicked heroin and achieved his sort of profound realization of his relationship with his interpretation of God, he dedicated his life to peace and love through music. And I really, I also understand that we need radical political, economic, institutional transformation. But, short of that, maybe I can, in any sort of insignificant way, bring a little more peace to the world through sound and through the way I try to live my life with my family.
Mhm.
Coltrane is he's just as big of an influence to me as Buddhist teachings.
And I
But
think that's where I
that's
was headed in the beginning. And you have integrated your two ways of being, and they become the same. And there's so much strength in that and energy. So to be able to like tease it apart and hear how those two things evolved has been an amazing story this morning.
Yeah.
yeah. And
You, oh, sorry, go ahead.
that's how we do anything is just with by doing those little things that you can. Nobody's, we're not going to go out there and make big moves to make the world a better place. It's through living that through our work and our passions and the things that bring us joy that bring that into the world. So that's exactly how it's done.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I struggle with that, being dedicated to pacifism, what is the path to try to help bring about radical political economic transformation? And, education and art has been what I gravitated toward. And maybe that's, I don't think you think this, but some people might say, well, that's a cop out. You should be more dedicated to community organizing or whatever. But I'm not suited to community organizing. I did it for a couple years. I tried to do it for a couple years, and I've been involved in a lot of stuff, not as an organizer, but as a participant. And I'm not suited to leading
And
organization.
we've mentioned there's so many ways, right? There's so many ways that we can use our authentic gifts. And I think the more true we can stay to our authentic nature, the more impact we do have.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's like a thing that my like 20-year-old self would have been too immature to understand, I think, very
Yeah.
much.
It's kind of interesting that you say that, and the cop out thing. You're right. There'll be that kind of comment. I hear it as well. My thought is along the lines of what you described as your unfolding of your life. A couple times I wanted to say, oh, the universe had that in place for you, and they're going to keep bringing back that Buddhist existence until finally you, because it may have been your destiny. I'm talking about things that often people describe. It was there. It was set out for you to take as you chose to. And you tried it several times before it finally clicked. And I know I've had some things in my life that I'm like, no, sorry. And then it comes back again. I'm like, oh, it's here again. But it looks a little different. And I try it again. And until finally, it's either complete and I've had enough of it and gotten the lessons that I needed, or I embrace it and I realize, okay, that works too. Uh, so in
You're
some
making me
ways,
you're making me think, like I got really into the band Fish when I was in high school. They're like a jam band, I don't know. People make
Oh yeah, I
yeah.
have lived in the fish days for
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
Yeah, okay. So people often make fun of them, they're kind of a joke, but I was way, in the 90s, I was way into Fish, and I went to go see them as much as I could around the Midwest. And the same thing that kept me going back to Fish concerts is what I heard in A Love Supreme. It's what I started to recognize doing Zazen. It's what I said I didn't drink or do any other things, but I've done like several macro sessions of psilocybin mushrooms.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with that. It's like there is this ineffable mm, experience where, and we've already mentioned this a couple of times, but you are just in it
Mhm.
without thinking about it. And at this point in my life, I'm in my mid 40s now. It's like, oh, I can look back and recognize the same thing was threaded through all of these different
Yeah.
experiences, like the fish
Mhm.
concert and the meditation retreats and the cold train and the mushrooms and the whatever, blah, blah, blah. It was all the same thing. It was all, oh, these are experiences that allowed me to be in the reality of the moment
Mhm.
at its most core. Uh, it's like, how do you describe it? I mean, I know I don't need to describe it to you, but do you know Bernardo Kastrup? He's a philosopher.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so he wrote that book, Science Ideated, that I really
Yes.
like,
Mhm.
about analytic idealism and how everything at base is consciousness and not matter, and matter is a manifestation of consciousness interacting with itself, blah, blah, blah.
Right. He
But
bumps into quantum physics quite a bit. Yeah.
yes, yeah, which I really appreciate, It's like Bernardo Kastrup describes how, according to the philosophy of analytic idealism, we are temporarily dissociated from the consciousness. So we have consciousness, but we are the consciousness conscious of itself. And at those moments where you are like in it, you're sort of approaching the boundary of dissociation,
Mm-hmm.
where it your illusory dissociated consciousness, you start to understand that, oh, right across this boundary is the consciousness, and that is where everything is one or whatever. And it's in those moments where I've gotten closest to that dissociative boundary,
Mm-hmm.
or like at a Fish concert when they're just everybody in the room is having this collective effervescent experience, and you reach that boundary, or when you're in a meditation retreat after 3 days and your back is in so much pain that all of a sudden everything gets illuminated.
Mhm.
Yeah, anyway, it's like the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It
Mm-hmm.
is the same thing, and I've said that often throughout my practice in Kundalini yoga, and it's so funny because I think it was 2000 around 2012 when I was doing some coaching training. And a gal in my session was telling me about this yoga that she really thought I would like. And she said the name of it and she described it to me. And I was like, yeah, no, I do this. And fast forward to 2017 when life throws me a health issue. So I have to search for something different. And I find this yoga, and it's not until I realize, I mean, it's even maybe a year later, I'm like, this is exactly what she was telling me to do. And that was the catalyst of opening, the door into where I could have those experiences as a Pisces sun moon. I'm very prone to um, being in altered states of mind. And so meditation gives that to me, when you can be in that state. And it's not every time, you don't sit down and hit that state every time. And it's not as intense usually, although it can be, as, an experience that is supported with earth medicines. But it's that same thing. Like you said, it's just a different tool. And it's funny how all of these paths lead us back to that one thing, which is that feeling of unity and that, like you said, you're just right there on that verge of what we're here. Yoga means union
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that purpose. And I feel like that's when the veil between us and that union with all of that is the ego. The ego is the lightest and the thinnest in those moments, and we can
Yeah.
experience that in many ways, but now mostly through practice. So I
Yeah.
find that. So I've also experienced that connection through being
From a
a
Hindu.
former fish head and to a Kundalini practitioner.
That's
And from a
great.
Hindu perspective, we've forgotten who we are, and being on earth at this time, any time that we're here, is looking back and remembering who we are. So we ask the question, who am I? And it brings us to all the things that you've described,
Yeah.
and we get glimpses of that along the way. And the path that you you also mentioned how things returned, and I know I've had that happen in my life. And you said you're in your mid 40s. Give yourself a few more decades and look back again, and I'll tell you what, you really see it. And when that happens, you realize that yes, you were always this, and all those events, experiences, relationships, things along the way, books that are read, whatever it is that comes into the life, the coffee bag, are little hints and clues to help us solve the mystery, to remember, bringing back our memory of who we are. And, and then at some point, we settle into the realization. And that's why hearing how you got involved with Zen Buddhism and music, it was always there.
Mm.
It was camouflaged or wrapped in illusion. And as you lived your life, it sounds like you just peeled some of that away,
Yeah.
and you kept saying, "Yeah, that's right. That's who I am." And yeah, that's okay. That's who I am. And I've had that experience too, and I know Ravi has as well because we talk a lot about that. And it was so, wow, I feel so honored that you said yes to come and share our
Yes.
time with
Thank
Zen.
you. Because this has just been fun. And I love hearing other people's stories. I've always said as many minds, as many ways. And that's why we, started doing this and just we wanted to have these conversations, and it's so fun to have someone share their own experience and their story. So thank you so much for doing that with us today. And then also tell people where they can, again, I know we mentioned it up top, but just where can folks find you or anything that you'd like to mention that you're doing, that you're putting out there.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Well, the first, just to echo what was just said, this whole like ongoing process of peeling back the self, so-called, and what is really there. This is one of the primary things. I don't say it to my students, but this is one of the primary things I'm hoping that my sociology and history classes can spark in my students, in my sociology classes especially. I do all these different activities throughout the semester and the year to try to just give them the opportunity to really do some self-examination. That's really kind of like what I lean into with that class now.
Mhm.
It's not what I started doing. When I first started teaching when I was 30 and I was like, blah, revolution, blah, I was like really heavy-handed about stuff. And now I'm really just like, no, these young people just need to like figure out what the self is.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I try to, and I don't think I know what it is. Just like together we can try to figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, to try, to talk about students, actually, to plug something, I lead a student music group at the high school. It's called the Normal Community High School Experimental Ensemble, and we have a record coming out April 17th. Um, I was very fortunate to get a grant to release it on vinyl, coming out on one of my record labels. It's called A Moment of Yet. It was, produced by the students. And so that's been really, really gratifying to work
That's
on.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What fun.
Haven't,
Awesome. I can't wait to hear that.
yeah, the manufacturer hasn't sent me I haven't gotten the record yet. It comes out in a week. I'm just like, oh, I should have delayed the release date a little bit. There's a record store in Japan and there's one in the UK that bought a couple of pre-sale copies. And so I'm like, by the time I get the records and ship them, they're going to be very late, but it's okay, whatever. Um, so that's coming out, and then like I said, in April 30th, I'm starting a 4-day run of shows with Tatsuya Nakatani and John Byler Dan. And so we'll be we're playing Bloomington, Peoria, Rock Island, and Chicago. People can look up my stuff online and find those venues if they're interested.
Would that be on your social media then so that
Yeah,
people can
yeah,
find out what that's about? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And your online one more time is
Oh, my
your,
music website is yeabig,
yeah,
YEABIG .weebly.com. And
yeah.
then
Okay.
Bandcamp is yeabig.bandcamp. My Instagram
Okay.
is just my
Great.
name, Stefen Robinson.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you for that. Those would be
Yeah.
some good things to look at. I'm lucky enough to be local, so I get to maybe even take part in a live version. So I'm excited
Oh
about
yeah, that's
that.
great. And then I'm the third Saturday of every month through October, except June and July, I'm hosting this thing called the Drone Circle. And it's like a drum circle, except it's people making drone music. Long, yeah,
Nice.
long.
Yeah.
So anybody can come and participate, or they can just come and listen or meditate or whatever. And we're hosting it at the First United Methodist Church on like ISU's campus.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
pastors there are super
Okay.
cool and nice, and they're letting us do that there. And that's been cool. It's been about 10 people or so every month so far.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Third
Yeah,
Saturday.
the third Saturday of the month through October, except June and July. I'm not doing it in June and July.
Is that in the evening or during the day?
7 o'clock, yeah, PM, 7
Seven
PM.
o'clock. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's been great. Like there's a guy that's been coming who told me he never plays out. He doesn't really make music with people. He just kind of like makes this weird stuff in his house, and this gave him an opportunity to do it with other people. And that for me was like the most meaningful thing about it because the drone circle idea was really about how, because in the culture that we live in, I don't think we don't really have a common shared collective music culture here. And the
Hmm.
shared music that we're all forced to participate in is all commercial, capitalist based nonsense. And there's a lot of cultures around the world that have these shared communal things that they do that they all just grow up doing. And so I, for a long time, I was like trying to figure out how can we spark something like that. It can't be forced. You can't just take like Indonesian gamelan culture and put it here,
Right.
or drumming traditions from some other part of the world and bring them here. It doesn't work like that. There's a whole cultural context in which those things become these enlightening communal experiences. And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I could just invite people to make drone music together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. There's so much coming up around that singing resistance, that's developing here, and across the United States. And again, a friend of mine or an acquaintance of mine who's been, making this kind of music and community singing zipper songs and call and response and coming together and using our voices or drum circles like we do have some in our area, but it's coming together and yeah, whether it's using your voice or folks who like you said, maybe in high school or schools, there's who still have music programs, you get introduced to making sound or, playing an instrument, but coming together in a frequency that is different than just using words is really powerful as a collective, as a society. So I love that you're doing that, and I'm definitely gonna have to check that out too.
Yeah, yeah. There's something to it. Yeah, it like taps into something that is unique to making pulsing, repetitive
Hmm.
thing. I don't know what it, I guess I don't, yeah, we do it with sound because there aren't actually words to describe
Right.
Right.
it.
It definitely hits deeper on a cellular level. It
Yeah,
does something that words cannot. It goes beneath the surface for sure.
totally.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Robbie, again, I'm so grateful that we had this opportunity with Stefan this morning.
It's been
So
awesome.
I wish everyone to like, subscribe, share, and we will see you again, Stefan, either in person or back for another round.
Yeah, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for
Thank you so
sure.
much. Yeah, I'd love to talk again. It's great.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Satnam.
Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.